Hey, Thomas, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Big fan of the show. I've been listening for about 4 years. So my experience in sales, it's about 15 years. Right out of university, I started in the sexiest industry, transportation and logistics.
You devil.
So I joined, it was just basically three companies, the purple, brown, and yellow. So I joined yellow, had about 11 years across multiple geographies. So a lot to talk about in Canada, the Caribbean, the Middle East. A lot of cultural differences, a lot of different ways of selling, both as an individual contributor and as a leader. Came back to Canada, so I've seen both sides from a cultural perspective in terms of meeting clients and helping them achieve their goals. Now I'm with a very large Chinese-based company. I'm 46th in the world on the Global 100. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Great. And did you like logistics?
Uh, Not at first, but you learn to love it, right? It's a great quote from that movie, Margin Call. You're unhappy, but I'm happy when I'm unhappy, right?
Yeah.
It's every day's different. There's always a challenge, and I love solving challenges. I love helping our clients become successful. So you really have to get creative, have a big network, both internally and externally. It's been 15 years. I think I'm here to stay. I've crossed the Rubicon, the point of no return, right?
Yeah. And how long was it before you started to like it? Or did you like it immediately?
I was extremely stressed out in my first year.
Yeah.
You go from a controlled environment in university where everything is black and white to a
Predictable.
gray environment where you don't know anything, and there's a lot of external factors that you can't control. So you're trying to control it, but so I developed quite a callus over the first 2 years, and it continues I continue to develop that callus, and it's so probably about 2 years, but it's a continual process. There's new challenges. It's such a big space. I mean, if you think about it, everything has to move from X to Y, whether it's domestic or international. And there's always a need, and it's morphing, right? It's become quite a hot area over the past 4 to 5
Yeah.
years with the launch of e-commerce, a lot of new players. So there's a lot of different facets. I've been exposed to a lot of different areas. So I'm continuing to learn, but to answer the question, probably about 2 to 3 years, but I'm in it for the long haul now.
Cool. And what do you see as your differentiator?
Yeah, so I think it can be a very commoditized space depending on which company you're with. So one of my mentors early on, I asked him that question, like, "What's our differentiator?" And he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, "It's you." And I've kind of taken that to heart over my career, and I think it's just having a strong sense of empathy with your client and understanding what their goals are, and not what your goals are, and helping them achieve their goals through your product and through your energy and effort. Right? It's every interaction with your customer and the decision maker is of high quality. You're helping them get their agenda across the board. And I think if you do that consistently over time, you'll reap the rewards.
And a lot of people never get that epiphany. A lot of people stick on the let me tell you how great we are versus let me hear what you'd like to accomplish.
Nobody cares, right?
Nobody cares. It's like the open secret, right? Nobody cares about anyone but themselves.
That's correct. And I think that's something I learned very early on is everybody has a different agenda, right? Whether it's internal or external. And you really have to uh, you know, frame your conversation around what their agenda is, and helping them achieve it, right? Otherwise, you're wasting your time, you're wasting their time, and you're going to be a robot eventually because you're just saying the same thing over and over again. And eventually, you'll hit something, but for the most, you're not really optimizing your time and effort.
And how do you demonstrate that, or how do you get them to open up? Because early in my career, I was on the other side of this. I was the guy running shipping and receiving for a manufacturing company. And I had somebody from one of those companies drop by at least once a day. And they were all nice.
Yeah, so I think it's know your audience, right? I think it's depending on what they like. You find common ground, whether it's sports, a common travel destination, the same school, make them laugh. At the end of the day, people are not going to remember that they saved 20% on their shipping in 2008. They're going to remember Thomas made me laugh like crazy at that dinner and at that Blue Jays game. And then when it comes to the price increase or anything else, that's all minimized because at the end of the day, people want you to be part of their tribe and they want you to be they want that trust, right? Whether they can't explicitly say it, it's implicit. And they'll do some mental gymnastics to make it work. But as long as you can win that trust and break the ice through some common ground and map it out long term, I think that's really the key.
And was that something you just picked up? Have you been a student of that? Is it something that was your parents told you? Because a lot of people still don't get that.
Team sports helped a lot
Yeah.
in high school. I played football. You build that camaraderie. My background is Polish, so it's a very a lot of hosting and big events and a lot of hospitality. So it's kind of, I think it was ingrained in me. I always tell my dad he's the best salesman I ever knew, but he worked at a factory for 25 years, right? But he can talk to anybody and convince, and he always tries to convince somebody to do something that that they want or don't want to do. So I think I kind of inherently got it from him, but he's able to like put someone's defenses down quite easily. Yeah, and I think I learned that from him, right? In terms of building that common ground.
And what motivates you? What gets you fired up?
I think the ability to create something out of nothing, right? It's Sales is a very unique profession where you have two inputs in your time and energy, and depending on how you decide to use those and create something, you can determine your destiny, right? So it's really an open map. It's a big piece of Play-Doh that you can utilize to get to where you need to be. So I think early in my career, it was about my ego and being the best, within the corporate team and having that sales mentality. I still have that. I think it's a very important trait of any great salesperson is to have a big ego. It's a competitive environment. But now I think now more it's about more of sales leadership. And I think intrinsically what really drives me now is when I see people that I've hired and they're doing better than I am because of the
Yeah.
things I taught them. And they probably made better decisions down the road.
And do you think you become a better rep or better salesperson since you've been able to train and develop and coach others?
I've never been asked that question before. I think so because I was very one. I was in a highway mentality. This is the way it's done. This is how you have to make things happen, and it worked for me. But when you hire a team, my
It
first
didn't
team was
work
quite large with 12. No one's like me. No one's as intense. Everyone's different, right? And then and you learn from your team as well, which is great, right? You're like, wow, I never thought about it that way. So I definitely learned a lot of patience over the years and a lot of self-reflection, right? And you get feedback indirectly, right? And at first you take it quite personally, but as you get older, you kind of appreciate it because it makes you better, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of the classic first time sales leader error is trying to hire twins of yourself.
Yeah, it
And
doesn't work out.
it's flawed from the beginning, right? Because do you really want 10 of you?
Yeah, no, and one of my early managers, weird analogy, but he's like, you want three A players, you want about five B players, a couple C players, and at least one donkey. That's what you need that's what you need on your team to make it work, right?
Well, I mean, because a lot of what you're talking about is evolutionary psychology. It's like tribal, how mammals interact. And I think people make the mistake of treating everybody like a professional and everybody's equal and identical, but that's not reality. Because if you have 10 people, someone's going to be the donkey no matter what.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
relative, right? Yeah, but
yeah.
you need that. You need to have that
It's
kind
going
of
to
that
happen,
mix.
right? It's unavoidable. So,
That's true.
and I think the sooner you learn those things, the sooner people understand why things happen.
What do you mean?
Well, like your example about the sale, everyone thinks it's price oriented, right? That all that matters is price. But price is only one piece of the friction. The other piece is, who do I trust? Who's going to get this done for me? That's reduction of friction, right? Because I know Thomas knows what I want and will get it done. It's like why you go to the same bar or restaurant often. The food's good, but the other places are good too. But you're comfortable. You know the manager. They wave hello. They know what you want. Your drinks show up. It's kind of frictionless.
Yeah, and it's true. And I'll tell you, one example of that is, I think it depends on which geography you're in. I think that's a lot more uh, highlighted in like the Middle East or the Caribbean. You don't understand how many coffees I had to drink at all my meetings. The sales cycles are so much longer. I mean, you're talking if it's 3 months in North America, you're looking at 6 to 9 months to get the business. You need to have multiple conversations. And if you always get served coffee in the Middle East, whether it's Turkish coffee or something, and you have to finish it. If you don't finish it, it's a sign of disrespect. So I had 6 calls a day. I'm jumping off the walls by the end of the day over a 9 month period. But that's what you need to do. They need to see you in over multiple days, in multiple states of mind, to feel like, okay, I can give you my business and we can be strategic partners. And the same thing goes forward in the Caribbean that I saw. It's more about, can I trust you? Can I work with you? And you have to meet them in a lot of different settings. I think that still is correct in North America. But when I came back from the Middle East, I was trying to apply these long sales cycles, and my manager's like, "What are you doing? We don't have time for this, right?" And then it's and here and the buyers are getting conditioned where sometimes they want it maybe intrinsically, but it does. There's a more of a heavier weight towards price, I'd say, in North America than there is in other parts of the world. Why that is, I'm not sure.
Well, I think it's people don't think they need it, but that's a different part of the brain that's saying that. But yet they hang around with the people that they do trust.
And that's true. And you might not get the sale in 3 months, but there's a very high likelihood when they're going for RFP or the incumbent drops the ball, you're going to be right there to pick it up and take it for 6, right? Because you've built that relationship.
Yeah, and I got to believe that's a key part of being successful in this type of market is being known, liked, and trusted. So when the opportunity arises, someone else fails, there's a change internally, the priorities shift, there's something urgent that needs to get done. Well, I know somebody.
Correct. That's right. Yeah, because sometimes they don't always have the ability to change.
Right.
Whether if they want, there has to be other things that happen, especially the larger the account. There's such a big internal dynamic within that company, right? Um, but yeah, you're right. It's about being known and about being present. And even though you don't win the deal today, just consistently, creating content or having or keeping that conversation alive,
Yeah.
because I think it goes a long way from the buyer's perspective. The fact that you're still talking to them, giving them advice, and helping them with their job, even if you don't have the business, right? It just builds credibility, and then eventually, that investment will pay off. Um, yeah,
And that's it. Because I think modern, when I say modern, I think the mentality today is, you know, discover, present, propose, close. And if they don't close, they're dead to me. And it's like, well, that's a kind of short sighted view of it because certainly in your business, they're always going to be shipping stuff.
correct. Yeah,
That's
there's
not
yeah,
going to, it's not one, oh, we got one box to ship. That's the deal. Right. It's
yeah,
like,
it's yeah, you're right. It's an interesting thing. Yeah, you're right. In our industry, there's always there's different facets of the supply chain to go after, right? But they're always going to have a need. right? Just
Yes.
that's one thing I loved about it is that when you win the deal, it's recurring revenue. It might go up, it might go down depending on the economy or their internal dynamics or their internal strategy, but it's revenue that's coming in every day, basically, right? And yeah,
And if you were to, let's say you were a DNA scientist, just for experiments here, well, what ingredients would you need and prioritize to build the ideal rep in your mind?
yeah, I think there's a few things. I think no one, not in particular order, but I think, we talked about it earlier, ego. So that sports mentality of wanting to be the best. I think empathy, really understanding where the buyer is coming from, where the people that you're dealing with, what they feel and what they require. Consistency day in and day out, right? I think it's a lot of people give up after 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 months, but I think if you stay consistent, eventually you're going to build something, with your client and with your marketplace. Sense of urgency, right? I think that's a big one that a lot of people don't have today. They just, there's there is there's you have to be your biggest manager. You have to put the most stress on yourself to get the job done. If your manager is talking to you, it's probably already too late. And then, a big thing for me is, I love using football analogies. But when you're on a sales call, it's like you're a running back, right? And if there's a hole open, sometimes it's only 3 seconds. You need to be able to identify those holes and hit it hard, because once that opportunity goes, it's the hole closes and you can't get that again. But if you hit that hole hard, depending on a need that's exposed either in between the lines or explicitly, you can really create some momentum within the account. And I think knowing your audience, right? So if you're in a call, prior to COVID, there's a lot of face-to-face, a lot of body language. Like, body language is so key. People don't get it. I took a great course when I was at Yellow. It was CIA training, right? And it was basically, there's so many different, and you can really understand what people are thinking. I know the cross the arms one everyone knows, but there's so many other little ones. If they're looking left or right, if they put their arms up like this, there's a lot of difference. And it's not always true, but I think if you collect it and over time you can build, an internal BS filter. You can start understanding if their words match their body. And I think the last thing is, sometimes I ask what your biggest motivator is, and if it's too heavy on money, I kind of get a bit. Money's important, but it's not
It's
really a
one.
motivator in my mind. It's a retainer. It's so I think, and if someone else offers them more money, they're going to leave, right? So I think those things, right? Consistency, internal drive, sense of urgency, ego, and just and continuous improvements, right? Just getting better and having and wanting to be in sales as a profession, I think.
Yeah. Uh, A lot of that kind of comes down to self-motivated. And I always kind of think I've never seen a successful sales rep that wasn't self-motivated.
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
That they can
Yeah.
leverage coffee and Tony Robbins or whatever else excites them, rock and roll music, whatever it is, but they proactively seek those things out and integrate them into their life.
Yeah, and I have to give you kudos. I discovered you when I was in Dubai, and I listened to one of your first podcasts. It was kind of when I was it was the beginning of the year, and I was trying to be the best sales rep. And a couple of things that you said really got me going, like energize the asset, right? Like, I was doing it already, but that's such a key component. Is you have to work out in the morning, get fired up, because you're about to face, you don't know
You're
what's gonna.
it, right?
That's right.
You
That's
can't go
right.
plug yourself into the wall to get rid, right? There's no.
And ultimately sales is the transfer of enthusiasm, right? So you need to be, if you're energized, you have to transfer that energy to your clients. But if you're not, you're dead man walking, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're essentially the comedian at the nightclub, right? You can't be out in the audience with your arms crossed looking for the waitress. You're the person that has to, part of it is entertainment, part of it is engaging. You got to want to talk with this person.
And you have to be naturally curious, right?
Yes.
And everything starts with energy. And I think, and just getting up and getting the day off to the right aspect. So yeah. And some other things that you mentioned too, like when you were going through some of the detail, like procurement versus purchasing. I had no idea, right? But it makes such a big difference, that level of detail, when you're heading into that direction, because you have a procurement, an Excel sheet warrior versus someone that can actually make a decision, right?
Yeah.
Um, but
Well,
yeah, yeah,
that's it, because certainly early in your career, you don't have that bullshit meter, right? So when somebody
yeah,
says, oh, it's too expensive, you think if you can get it lower, they're going to buy. Well, that's a lot of times just gaslighting. They're just giving you some reason to go away, not to engage, or they're not asking for a lower price. They're just asking you, please find someone else to talk to.
yeah. And that goes back to that, the happy ears that you always talk about as well. I thought that was hilarious, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
because
can know now. I know in 10 seconds, right, if they're full of it or not.
oh, and I'm sure since you were doing face-to-face on-site selling, the energy that goes into getting there, right? It's not like picking up the phone where, oh, someone doesn't show or they're boring or not interesting. You can say goodbye and on to the next one. When you fly somewhere,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's traffic, ironing your shirt in the morning, getting ready, right? Like being on time, missed meetings, right? They're huge energy, right? So that you have to be on point, and you really have to, optimize your discussion when you're there. I think, you make a good point, right? I think a lot of salespeople entering now, over the past 2 years may not have that face-to-face
yeah.
experience, just by the market, what the market dictated. It's going to be a very different experience going from talking to an avatar in your shorts to going face to face, and where all the little details matter, right?
Well, that's it, because I had a pretty standard routine where I traveled Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I tried to keep it to 2 meetings a day, but they were pretty involved meetings. So if one goes south, that's 1/6 of my week. Plus, I'm getting up at 4 in the morning to get there, which does a job on your head, because it's really hard to adjust your body to that. So you're always a little tired and you're out of sorts. You're going to some place you really haven't been to before. It better be a good meeting. So if it isn't, you really learn your lesson. I was always in the, I'm going to predict or prevent this from happening again.
Yeah. How did you prevent, like, what were the telltale signs of, before you go in, knowing if it's worth your time or not?
Well, they had to have the problem. They had to have some curiosity or interest. They had to be able to afford it. And there was a real project around it. It wasn't a science experiment. And and I can't tell you, because I when you joined a new company, you really didn't know how to judge and had some inside person schedule. And one time they sent me to someone's personal house. So I'm knocking on someone's house selling $100,000 piece of software. And I'm like, this is just stupid.
Did you close the deal?
It was no deal to have. It was like the house was the product was more expensive than the house they lived in.
And what do you think about metrics? The one thing that I saw was, you need 32 calls a week from somebody that's never sold before. So you're filling your calendar with these meetings that actually don't mean anything, just to hit a metric, that, right? So you just have this low quality, high quantity, and
Right.
it's not correlated, right?
That's not the objective. The objective is not to be busy. No football coach says, go out there and run into each other a lot. No, there's a structure to it. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Yeah, you practice, and not all of it's 100% useful. But, several times you'd have a manager, count the number of this or that, and you just make it up. And I'd see the people sweating it, and it's like, sell something. Everything goes away when you sell something.
Correct. Yeah. You can break the rules a little bit, I think, right?
Yeah, because what does every manager want? Revenue.
That's it. That's it. That brings everybody together. High performance, revenue results. Nobody's going to care if your CRM is not up. I mean, they will, but it's minimized, right? It's if you can do both, you're perfect. But you're right. At the end of the day, it's the end justifies the means, right?
Yeah. And what do you feel is your weakest thing that if you could only increase this, it would take your career to the next level?
I think it's a couple of things. It's a great question. It, it's a little. I think understanding that uh, more is possible. I think because sometimes I limit myself thinking I can't do that or I can't do this. But there's a great quote from I think Henry Ford, right? Whether you can or you can't, it's probably true. I think that's one of my favorite quotes. So I have to be a little bit more open-minded into certain areas, and not bury them before I've even tried. Whether that's going after a major account or a new job opportunity, or trying different avenues or different industries, right? So I think that's probably something I would change, because you get into a locked-in mentality.
Yeah.
If your habits are working and it's provided the results that you want, you kind of stay down that way. So I think just um, you know staying curious and staying confident that you can go down uncharted waters and still be successful.
And have you fallen into any major traps in your sales career on not growing? Because a lot of people get comfortable in a certain segment or deal size or transaction length or only selling to certain types of people.
I don't think so. I've seen everything. I've seen, a small deal that's, someone's startup company out of their garage to the US military in Qatar, right? Where
Yeah.
I have like F-16s flying over my head and dealing with generals, or, Emirates Airlines in the Middle East. So I've seen everything. I think what that's given me is kind of understanding, um, yeah, as the deal's getting started or as you've identified your target market, what it's going to look like, and what are the milestones, who are the key players, what are their requirements, how long is it going to take, how do I have to adapt to make this work, right? And I think that's one thing that I've taken over my career, which has helped me be quite flexible in different situations, and understanding if I do X, it's not going to work, if I do Y, it won't work. And sometimes, a lot of something I'm seeing recently is people are trying to go after everything.
Right.
Sometimes you have to realize a poor investment and simply cut your
Yes.
losses. Like early on, it's just so much better because the opportunity cost is too high.
Well, I mean, that's one of the downsides of having all this technology because you open up any CRM and it all looks the same and it's so big and vast. So you think you have this great pipeline and you think you have to
Sure.
work on all of it.
Correct.
But if
That's
you
right.
really ask yourself, how many deals do I really need to do to crush it? And then why am I working on all these other deals that have less likelihood of closing?
That's correct. And that's
Yeah.
right.
And is there, or what is the key distinction in your view between like the very best A players and then the next tier, the B players?
I think it's that, I think we talked about it earlier. It's the ability to connect with your clients on an emotional level, and build that relationship, and not just talk about price or what your company can do for them. It's the consistency, it's time management. It's a precious resource along with your energy. Just making sure they're optimized to ensure the best outcome. And then internal, right? Just being able to marshal resources and having those internal relationships, not reactively but proactively,
Yeah.
right? So just building credibility internally before you actually need something, so things can move quicker. If you do it the other way where it's reactive, it's painful because people just automatically think that you're putting more work on their plate as opposed to, hey, I want to help my buddy.
Well, that is a big difference. It's certainly a big difference between the people who move up from a management standpoint because You could be the killer outside, but if you're not, a little bit of a teddy bear inside and somebody who can expedite things and help other people become champions internally, you tend
That's
not
true
to.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. You need to, yeah, yeah. What's that quote? Victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeats an orphan, right?
Defeats an
So,
orphan.
so take the heat when things go sour and things go well. Just distribute the
Spread it around.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're making the commission, so it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't. No, the bank doesn't take credit on deals, just cash on deals.
Correct.
Cool.
Correct.
Hey, Thomas, really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
LinkedIn, right? My name's Thomas Novak. Just you can NOWAK connect with me there. And yeah, thanks for your time today.